After Effects allows you to create stunning motion graphics and visual effects with precision and creativity. Its powerful tools and extensive capabilities make it an essential software for professionals in video editing and animation. So let's remake this intro. I've already done some prepping here for the video. I just lined the text pieces up with the audio that I already pre-recorded. After Effects allows you to create stunning motion graphics and visual effects. And before we start, I also have to mention that I use a couple of free plugins and also paid plugins, FX Console, Deep Glow, and Flow. I also have to mention the background. Basically, I have just different backdrops here, and for each and every one, I had different effect controls. For example, here and on most of this, I used Noise HLS Auto and added here like around 20% of noise. Maybe it's too much, maybe it's like 13. Yeah, it looks better a bit. In the backdrops like this, I also used levels to kind of bring up the highlights, the light parts and the black parts of the video to make it more graphic, more grungy. And I also use noise here, around 90% of lightness. Here I used pattern from the previous video. I just inverted it with the invert effects. Then I used Uni Noir, which added this vignette and added like black and white texture. And I just added more noise here. It's the same here with levels. Also added some noise and leveling, and also used levels on the same thing just to be more stylized. But let's talk text. So I have 9 text pieces here, and we will use 9 different small animations and tricks that you can use with the text in After Effects. If you're a beginner, they will be great and they're really easy to do. So let's start with the first phrase. You have to go to this layer and press animate button, then use the opacity, and we're gonna automate the opacity. So we're gonna go to 0 and we go to range selector, choose the start option and toggle this stopwatch, and we go to the end or maybe several frames forwards and up to 100, and we will have a simple animation of text reveal. So now we need to add a couple of keyframes to actually match the audio, and we also can change the advanced settings. Instead of using characters, we can use words, so we can be more specific with how the text appears on the screen. So for example here, and finally 100%. Let's see how it goes. After Effects allows you to create... We can do it a bit better by choosing all the keyframes and going to the Flow. If you're not using Flow plugin, we'll basically use the graph editor. It will take a little bit more time to get the right shape and motion, so Flow is just a bit easier to work with. And in this case, I will choose something like maybe this. We'll apply it and see the result. After Effects allows you to create... So it's a little bit more gentle, it's a little bit nicer looking. The second animation is really popular as well. You can kind of combine it with opacity that I just showed you. Go to Animate, choose the position option. We're gonna add the selector, choose Wiggly, and then Wiggly selector, we're gonna open up, change the position, and the position of the letters change. So we're gonna choose maybe like 10 and 8. Correlation to 0, wiggle per second 0, like 0, maybe like 6. And we're gonna hold Alt and press the toggle on random seed, and we will change to random. Maybe make it 500. And we're gonna also add like posterized time. Maybe like 5. And here's the animation. Create stunning motion graphics. So we add just a little bit of wiggle to the letters. Create stunning motion graphics. Yeah, so the higher posterized time is, the faster the movement of the letters will be. We can now actually combine this animation, the previous one, with this like jittery animation, and it will also look pretty cool. So we go to Animate, we're gonna go to Opacity. So the opacity will go to 0, we can go to Range Selector, and we're gonna do the same thing with Range Selector. At the start of the 0, press the toggle button and go here, go to 100, and let's see how it looks. Create stunning motion graphics. And it looks pretty unique. You can also play here with like flow charts and choose different graphs, but in here it looks, I think, better without easing in or easing out, because it's like jittery and a little bit like cartoony collage style type of text. Create stunning motion graphics. The next effect is great if you're doing like digital futuristic animations. So we're gonna go to Animate as usual. We're gonna choose Character Offset. We're gonna change left to top to just adjust kerning. We're gonna change Character Offset. As you can see, the letters change. So we're gonna make this a letter change effect, like this effect. So we can change the keyframes and make it like maybe -50, and we're gonna toggle animation. We're gonna go to this place in the text, change it back to 0, and it will go back to the text that we originally have. And what we're also gonna do, we're gonna go to Range Selector and change the start position. So we're gonna toggle animation here, go to the last keyframe here, and change the start to 100, and now this animation will look like this. and visual effects. This one is pretty quick, so maybe we're gonna change keyframe positions to somewhere like here, and visual effects. Next up, the text animation is actually our first two animations that we did, but with additional flair. I will show you what I mean. So what we're gonna do is, once again, we go to animate, we choose opacity, we're gonna change opacity to the 0, go to the start option, toggle it, animate the same way we used to do it, go back to 100, and next up we're gonna add some flair that I talked about. So here we'll choose animate, we're gonna choose blur this time, and we will add some blur, like maybe 30 or 40. We will add a lot of blur, and we're gonna change the range selector. We're gonna animate the start position, do it like this, and do it with 100 here as well. If we play the animation right now, precision and creativity, we can see a bit of blur, like additional blur there, but it doesn't seem right. It isn't that obvious, so we're gonna just change the position of these blur keyframes just a bit. So the opacity keyframes will stay in place, and the blur keyframes, will move them just a bit further. Precision and creativity. And as you can see, it looks much better. We can actually add even more blur, I think, like maybe 50 blur. Precision and creativity. And it looks great. Do the same thing with flow chart and add something like this, maybe. Precision and creativity. Yeah, it looks super smooth and super nice now. Precision and creativity. Another cool way to use opacity to animate text is this way. So we're gonna choose opacity once again, open up the range selector, open up advanced, we're gonna turn on randomizer, and we're gonna put a random seed, like maybe 50. And we're gonna lower the opacity to 0 once again, and we're gonna animate the start position. Let's toggle it, go here, and go back to 100. Let's see how it works. It's powerful tools, but for flickering, we need to animate the random seed as well. So we're gonna toggle it here, it will be 50, and here it will be maybe like 12 or something. It's powerful tools, and yeah, now it looks much better. We're gonna change the keyframe positioning right here. Let's press U to hide everything else. Yeah, just change frame positioning keyframe like this. It's powerful tools. Yeah, and we will have enough time to read the text actually. Using graphs here isn't really necessary as well. It looks good as it looks, but we can experiment just a little bit, maybe do something smooth like this. It's powerful tools, and you can add maybe some easing, but on its own, it already looks okay. A pretty silly animation that I don't really use a lot is this one. Go to animate, we're gonna enable per character 3D. After that, we go to animate and add some rotation, because we're gonna rotate our letters, and you can choose axis here. In this case, I chose the x-axis, so we will basically just animate the rotation. As usual, we go into the range selector, press the toggle button here, then go back to here and go to 100, and let's see how it looks. And extensive capabilities, so we're gonna add some easing. And extensive capabilities make this animation is really situational. I don't really use it that much. It's still a cool way to animate text, but this animation I use a lot because it looks really smooth, it's really simple, and it works for a lot of situations. So we're gonna, as usual here, choose opacity 1 and choose position. So the opacity will go back to 0 and position will be like 100, so text will go back. Let's go back to 100 and create a mask. You're gonna press Ctrl-Shift-N. We created a mask here around the text that we will have, and now we will change the opacity. Gonna change the position to 100, and here we're gonna animate the start option here, which will be as usual from 0 to 100, somewhere here. Back here, use this range selector, animate the start here, go back to this one, go back to 100 here. Let's press U to hide everything else. And let's see how it looks. Make it an essential software. It looks like a letter, but I like to actually use here. Let's see how it looks, maybe like this. Make it an essential software. So as you can see, I also wanted to change the position here to maybe like 140, so the whole text will hide underneath. And besides opacity, I will also add some blur. Now it will. So if we change keyframes here and move it once again, we will have the similar animation that we already had with just text reveal, but we want our letters to go from below. We will leave the keyframes as they are, make it an essential software, and it looks clean and really nice. Another text animation which I love looks like this. So we're gonna go to animate, we're gonna use the tracking option. If we change tracking, as you can see, we will kind of collapse the text into one blur. So we're gonna use this tracking, and we also gonna use opacity as usual. So let's use opacity once again, change it to 0. We're gonna use range selector here. We're gonna change the tracking amount to something like this, -59. We're gonna go to range selector, and we're gonna go to, I'm gonna start this one, move it here, and we're gonna go to start this, 100 and 100, as we already did, collapse with U. Let's see how it looks. Where for professionals. And now we will also add some flow here. It will look much nicer with the flow, maybe like this. Where for professionals. Yeah. and it looks really clean. It can be a great preset for text animation if you're editing talks or podcasts or something. It just looks great. Where for professional. And for the last animation, this one is the most used animation by me. It's similar to something that I already showed you in Premiere Pro tutorial, but in After Effects it can be a bit smoother, a bit nicer. I will go to text options once again, go to animate, gonna choose the opacity as I did for almost all of this text in this video. I will also go to animate and I will use the position. I will once again create a mask. So Ctrl-Shift-N, we created a mask around the text. We're gonna go back to opacity to 0 and we're gonna change the position to 140. We're gonna go to range selector and range selector here. We're gonna start this one and this one. Gonna collapse everything with U and we're gonna go to maybe here and we're gonna go to 100 here, 100 here. Video editing and animation. But in this case, I much prefer not animating by character, but per word. So we're gonna go to advanced, we're gonna use words, and I think it will look better. Video editing and animation. It still uses by character because I didn't change it here, and we have to choose words here as well. And let's see how it looks in video editing and animation. Here it will be a bit better to add some more keyframes to actually match our audio a bit better. So I will do exactly that. Let's add some flow to this one. Let's see how it looks in video editing and animation. We can of course add some blur here. Let's try it out. Maybe it will look pretty cool. Video editing and animation. Yeah, blur just adds a little bit of flair to the text. So in this case, video editing and animation. Maybe change keyframes just a bit. Video editing and animation. Maybe you can choose some other flowcharts. Video editing and animation. I think it looks really good. And you know, the small things like adding blur, changing keyframes positioning, it will add some personality the way you animate text. So you have to just experiment in the things that you will like and see how it will work for you. So this is all about animating the text, and now let's add actually some effects to make this text look cooler. So the first thing that I actually love doing in After Effects is using the same trick that I showed in the previous video in Premiere Pro, but here with the backdrop that we have. So let's go to the first text piece that we have, a backdrop of this like paper texture. We're gonna duplicate it by Ctrl-D and we're gonna move it up to here and move it above our text piece. And we're gonna use it as a texture inside our text. In the track matte position, we're gonna choose instead of none, Luma matte backdrop 10. Now we can see the texture inside the text, but the text is too dull, so we have to change how our backdrop looks. So we're gonna go to effect controls here. We already used invert here to make this paper black, and we're gonna add some effects here. So I will use Ctrl plus space to bring up FX console, that free plugin that I talked about. I'm gonna use the curves, and by changing curves we will basically make our text brighter, but the texture will remain. So now, as you can see, After Effects allows you to create. Now our text has a texture and it looks like ingrained in the paper. In this particular case, I wanted to add a little bit more flair and not only use curves, but I also wanted to use Deep Glow that I already talked about. It's a paid plugin, but you can use a regular After Effects glow, so you can skip this one. And I'm gonna use Deep Glow on the text actually. So we're gonna go to the text, Control space, Deep Glow. It's too much, obviously, so we're gonna change the radius maybe to like 40. Maybe even it's too much. We're gonna change the exposure to like something like this, maybe 0.3, and we're gonna add some chromatic aberration, which I really like. Maybe radius will be like even lower, maybe like 30. So this way the text just looks a bit more personal. After Effects allows you to create. Let's go back to our curves and maybe add a bit more. Yeah, I will change, as you can see, I changed the curves even more, so the text will pop this way. So yeah, and this is how the text looks here. After Effects allows you can do the same trick with all the text in this video, and in this case I will just copy the Deep Glow. I will just copy it and by Ctrl-V use it on all the text that I have here. To create stunning motion graphics and visual effects with precision and creativity. Its powerful tools and extensive capabilities make it an essential software for professionals. You can just reuse the first layer that we have. We just can copy it and move it to this layer, change it to Matte Luma backdrop. We're gonna adjust the position. Stunning motion. As you can see, in this case, like this grungy texture looks pretty nice with this backdrop, so we just copied the first one. We can do the same thing with basically everything here. here. So I will just copy this backdrop and use for most of the text. In places where it's a bit better to use actually the native backdrop, like for example with these ones, I will use this backdrop even though I used levels here. So I will copy it. I will move the backdrop to this lane. I will also use here Luma Matte. I will actually delete the levels on the top layer that we use as a track matte, delete the noise, and I will use the curves that I already have here. So I will copy it. I will move here and just Ctrl V, and it looks a bit better, but it doesn't look perfect. And it doesn't look perfect because I actually changed the opacity of this layer. So I have to go to the opacity and go back to 100, and now it looks much better. So as you can see, make it an essential, so it looks great. I will do the same thing with this clip. I will copy it. I will move it here, delete the levels, I will delete the noise, I will use it as a Luma matte, and I will also change the opacity here back to 100. Here it doesn't even need any curves actually, it looks good without curves even, but I will still use some curves. Maybe it's too much here, so I will change curves a bit, but this texture, you know, it creates this grungy look. In this case, maybe it's not that essential as well, but generally, like, the more texture you have on the layer that you use as a track matte, it will add more texture, it will add more uniqueness to the text. So I will reuse this layer basically on everything else, and I will cut it, of course, because it's just a repetitive task. And with the last one, Luma Matte Drop, it's too much noise here, so I will change it like to 6% maybe 8, be alright. Let's see everything once again. After Effects allows you to create stunning motion graphics and visual effects with precision and creativity. Its powerful tools and extensive capabilities make it an essential software for professionals in video editing and animation. I think now everything looks great. We added a lot of texture, we added a lot of unique things, like everything works together here, the backdrops help each other. So in this video I used a lot of the same methods and the same techniques, because usually you don't need to do anything fancy with texts. You can choose the same like ideas with opacity and with positioning and with masking, and just add a little bit of flair to your text with maybe a deep glow or maybe unique blur or maybe the graph editor with a flow plugin like I showed you, and it will make your text a bit different, it will be a bit unique. Yeah, thank you for watching this video. Currently YouTube doesn't want me to actually post links because my channel is new, but I will make a Patreon and I will leave all the assets for you to use for free, of course, and if you want the project file, you can go to my Patreon and get it there. So thank you for watching and see you next time.